you don't pull it together, you're gonna regret it, and it'll be Sabina all over again.
Now, I'm sure many of you have read the title of this video and are very confused, to say the least. Mountain, why make a video analyzing Kevin? I mean, you built your entire 13 subscriber empire off of talking about video games, so why suddenly jump ship to Kevin? And besides, what is there even left to say about Kevin? What is there that you could possibly add to the conversation that hasn't already been said? Countless theory and speculation videos populating the internet talking about how amazing, deep, and relevant Kevin is. Kevin is literally a mainstay of the Steven Universe franchise. And listen, don't worry about it. Were I in your position, I too would be understandably confused. In fact, I might even be annoyed by how oversaturated Kevin has become, and for continuing to contribute to him becoming the next Sans Undertale, or Sans Deltarune for those of you in the Undertale fanbase. However, I just wanted to preface this video by saying that this is not for the average Steven Universe fan. Those of us that know that it is in fact okay to attempt murder on those who would desecrate sacred ships. And that Cartoon Network is an evil cisgendered company that never once cared about Steven Universe because they're racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic, fake, living in the 90s, moralizing Trump supporters who would rather die in glory than admit that their most successful show is mostly made of lesbians. No. Instead, this episode is made for the Steven Universe detractors, if you will. Those who believe that Kevin is a self-absorbed a-hole whose lack in character development is matched only by his unwavering ego. I mean, after all, Steven Universe is a kid's show with fat jokes, naked jokes, and similar jokes that pander to the lowest common denominator. And to an extent, I will capitulate, Steven Universe is all of those things. And it is, in fact, just a stupid show about magic lesbian space Nazis intended for children. And it would take way too long to explain it to someone who has already made up their mind on the topic. So, normally I would have just ignored them. I mean, they're just haters. They've never made a show in their life, what do they know? However, while binging Steven Universe Season 1 with a friend for an upcoming video, I learned that she and a surprising number of others didn't fully understand why Kevin was such a good character. Now, I'm not saying that these people are interpreting a character wrong, but they're kind of interpreting a character wrong. Needless to say, my disappointment was immeasurable, and my day was ruined. To any Steven Universe fans still watching, there are way more detractors than any of us were prepared for. I legitimately cannot fathom a single reason why anyone would have a problem with this show. And that's why I'm making this video. Not for money, not to make a statement, but merely to educate the unintellectual. Just remember that this is a stupid show about magic space lesbian Nazis intended for children. Alright, let's start. But before we can discuss Kevin, we'll need some background in the form of Stevani. Because despite these two being completely different characters, they, together as Kevani, are completely inseparable and instrumental to understanding the complex themes elegantly layered onto their characters. And we know this because every single major Stevani episode has Kevin. Oh, and also vice versa, every Kevin episode has Stevani in it. Here's a chart of every single episode with the Stevani in it. With the exception of any episodes in which Stevani is just a minor element, and this episode right here is more so an episode about Steven and Connie rather than Stevani, we're left with two major episodes. And if we take a look at every episode Kevin is in, oh look, it's the same list. With, of course, one exception, but we will get to Kevin Party when we get to Kevin Party. Let's get started with Stevani. Stevani is, as my friend described it, two kids in a trench coat. Yes, this is the same friend who inspired me to make this. And that's no coincidence, because while some are able to grasp the pieces, very few are able to put it together in a way that's narratively satisfying. I digress. In Stevani's introduction episode, the big thing that is immediately established is Stevani as the embodiment of innocence. They have no idea what they're doing. They spend most of their time doing whatever they want because that's what they assume adults do while they're at school. And you know how there's always that one scene in those old movies where the two characters are actually in a trench coat, and the top decides to deepen their voice in order to act like an adult and try to convince the people behind them that they're over 18. Well, Steven Universe once again flexes its creativity in writing by having this scene play out for a more modernized audience. I mean, it is, after all,
current year.
Movies literally don't care who walks into their theaters. No one even goes to see movies anymore, they just pirate them off of Kiss Anime or something. And most people are aware of the existence of credit cards and ID systems. In this instance, Stevani flirts with the shopkeep in order to get free donuts, a skill probably picked up from the many graphic novels and R-rated video games that Steven's dad lets him play. The world is still black and white in their eyes, and they don't see any problem with it. Everyone they meet is their friend, everyone that doesn't like them is their enemy, and there's not really any in-between. Stevani views the whole world as a sort of childlike wonder that is critical to understand Kevin. Now we have circled back to Stevani being intertwined with Kevin. We find our main man and central topic of discussion just hanging around, which for those of us who have actually been to parties know that it's actually a sign of insecurity, fear, and doubt. Then, Stevani decides to start dancing, but soon takes notice of the crowd around them, and begins to panic. And remember, at this moment, everything that is about to happen is sort of an artistic and subjective blur left up to interpretation. But just follow me for a minute here. Kevin enters this dreamscape and says,
"Hey baby, get ready. It's Kevin time."
Never before has there been a more effective way of establishing a character. Kevin is insecure, cowardly, maybe even scared, but he's willing to put all of that aside if it means being able to help someone. He begins by talking with them, and eventually dancing with them, using the moves that he's no doubt been practicing for weeks in preparation for this dance, because truthfully, he is scared of what he's about to do, but he's willing to put all of that aside. However, it's soon revealed that Stevani is just two kids. Kevin gets embarrassed, and then the episode ends. Just like that. Now, it may seem kind of abrupt, but in actuality, it is an amazing conclusion to the Godfather levels of writing that this trilogy is about to start. Oh yes, I said trilogy. However, let's take a minute to actually analyze this episode before moving on to the next episode. If Stevani is the embodiment of innocence, then this scene is Kevin acting like a kid. For just one moment, Kevin isn't interested in how other people view him. Rather, he's interested on helping out this person he's never even met before, simply because it's the right thing to do. Eventually, though, he takes note of the other people watching, and goes back to his insecure ways, symbolized by Stevani unfusing, and thus setting up an amazing character arc that would be fulfilled in the later episodes. Unfortunately, Cartoon Network has never cared about this show, and due to time constraints had to be pushed back to later seasons. This brings us to the episode Beach City Drift, an episode all about growing up and abandoning childhood. These themes are echoed in the opening minutes, where Steven and Connie theorize that because their fusion is both of them combined, then, theoretically, Stevani is old enough to drive. This is of course untrue, they merely have the persona of an adult, with none of the actual experience. We also get to see the fallout of Kevin's actions. Steven and Connie are enjoying the luxury that Greg's newfound fortune has granted them, when Kevin shows up. We find that Steven now has an absolute hatred of Kevin, while Connie, while also harboring this, is more easily able to keep her cool due to being more mature. Kevin also doesn't remember either of these two, which is a clever nod from the Crewniverse that the party was all symbolic and in reality they never actually met. Skipping to the part that actually matters, we see Kevin attempting to go after more women, setting up for something that will become very important later. At some point, Kevin met up with a lady called Sabina, and is more than likely using his race car in order to woo the woman and gain respect with his friends. She wasn't actually shown off in the episode, because of course, this is a development that happens off-screen and will be told to us later, because Steven Universe is a show where things happen off-screen, without Steven's input, and we are left to interpret how things went down. Regardless, we can see Kevin flexing his new car and attempting to impress his friends, and possibly girlfriend, only for our embodiment of innocence to, in his mind, get in the way. Of course, Kevin is smarter, and knows that attempting to act a fool in front of his friends will only lead to embarrassment. To Kevin, there is only one option: abandon his childhood. This culminates in a race against Stevani, where Kevin has everything to prove. He's not some childish kid anymore, he's an adult. He has to get rid of these things, otherwise no one will take him seriously. I'm 18, I can drive, drink alcohol, go where I want, do whatever I want, so why does everyone insist on treating me like a kid? If this were a kid show, Kevin would have realized what was going on, and would have intentionally lost the race. But Steven Universe is anything but a children's show. So Kevin wins. And his reward? Well, let's just say that it wasn't worth it. And as for Stevani, for essentially abandoning him and leaving him in the dust, well, they're not mad. They're not disappointed. Instead, they just leave. No words, no resistance. He made his bed, and now he gets to lie in it. Unfortunately, once again, it would be much, much later until we saw the climax of this arc. Cartoon Network was in full Southern Georginian mode. Kevin was too innovative, too controversial for the racist Trump supporters to be able to air the episode. If Kevin was in it, they took it down and removed all traces of him. It seemed as if we would once again never get to see Kevin. But then, something happened. A miracle of sorts. It was just another one of the Steven bombs, and nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary. The episodes were relevant, and contained realistic portrayals of how relationships are degraded and then restored. Every single one of the episodes integral to the overall plot, and it seemed as if we were in for another round of great Steven Universe episodes. And then, Kevin Party. That's right, this whole bomb was not only build up to the reveal of another long-awaited Kevin episode, but also a secret ploy to get Kevin past the censors. They knew Cartoon Network would go through every single one of their episodes to see if Kevin was in it, and would reject it if they even found so much of a reference to him. However, giving them 5 episodes at once hopefully would increase the likelihood of them just getting lazy and validating the episodes to collect their paycheck. So, the Crooniverse got to work, devising the most realistic, crowd-pleasing, and heartwarming arc they ever had and ever will make. Remember, the more humane and pleasing the characters were, the bigger the likelihood that Cartoon Network would skip it out of disgust. And it worked. Kevin was finally given an episode that was all about him. Not only was it the perfect climax for his arc, but also for the Stevani breakup arc, and no one would have expected how much thought and care went into crafting this masterpiece of animation. The episode starts with Steven looking for a way to get Kevin back. Kevin also reflects on this, as we see him walking up to Steven and asking if he can find a way to get Stevani back. This symbolizes Kevin's fractured innocence and attempt to restore it. But we also see that he is embarrassed to be seen around Steven because he's a kid. Kevin doesn't want to be seen acting like a kid. Another thing that's very telling is his comments about Stevani.
Stevani is better than me, okay? Stevani truly does not care what anyone thinks. That's why they're the coolest. If I can't be the coolest, I at least gotta be seen hanging with the coolest.
Kevin now realizes that his innocence and outgoing attitude was more appealing than the fake cool guy persona he had attempted to portray in order to impress people. Another amazing detail by the Crooniverse is how Kevin goes about trying to bring Stevani back. A party. You know, the same place he first met Stevani. Kevin is attempting to regain his innocence by hosting a party, because that's the only way that he believes that he can regain his sense of self. Obviously, this is a changed person from who we saw in Beach City Drift, and later we'll find out why. At the party, we see Kevin getting even more desperate to bring Stevani back. He starts off with just basic materialism, his pool, his mansion, his drinks. Unfortunately, his greed leads to even more harm, manipulation, peer pressure, and even attempting to send Steven down the same path he took himself, that he is currently trying to undo, and then he lets it slip.
You're gonna regret it, and it'll be Sabina all over again.
Sabina had dumped him, and from the tension in his voice from that line, he clearly didn't take it well. It was his rush to grow up that made her decide that it was time to look elsewhere. And now he's gone back to doing the exact same thing that made her leave in the first place. That's why he indulged himself in capitalism. That's why he grew so desperate to get to Stevani. Why he chose a party, of all things, to throw in order to get her back. And this works. Kevin finally reunites the fractured pieces of his childhood. He figures out how to be a child again. But it's too late. His innocence has fully left him. And there he stands, getting mocked and laughed at, literally drowning in a pool of his own greed and desperation. He didn't need his innocence, and now it doesn't need him. I would like to end this video with a little story of mine. As close as you can to getting an ending. I'm still on page 6 out of 7. Many in the Rick and Morty community hate Jerry. He's a bumbling, moronic idiot who uses pity to his advantage, and is constantly getting overshadowed by Rick. To the community, Rick is much more appealing. He's a drunken scientist who can go wherever he wants, do whatever he wants, and he does it all because he's smart. He became God. As such, the community is plagued with pseudo-intellectuals with a god complex, who believe that they have much more in common with Rick than anyone else. And, to be fair, you have to have a very high... But in reality, these people are Jerry. I guess it just comes down to people not liking mirrors. Everyone wants the character to be realistic, but there's a point to where the character becomes so realistic that it reminds people of how shit their lives are, and as a result, they dislike the character. Not because there's something inherently wrong with a character, but because a character is too good. The reason I bring this up is because this sentiment is mirrored in Kevin and Steven. They're believing in Steven. They want to be the kind of person who just tries to make people happy out of some sort of childlike desire to not see anyone sad and to have everyone be your friend. But in reality, they're Kevin. They were in a rush to grow up. They lost sight of what they really cared about. They surrounded themselves with objects and luxury, because that's what society says will make them happy. But it won't. And so they lash out, unable to accept that, just maybe, Kevin is a better character than what they originally thought, and they should give him a second chance. But they can't do that, because then they would see that Kevin has the same flaws as themselves, and they came to this show in order to feel better about themselves, because they love seeing their positive aspects portrayed onto characters so that they can self-insert. But with negative aspects, well, let's just say they didn't come to a children's cartoon to feel bad about themselves. Okay, this video was kind of a downer, so I do want to offer some sort of silver lining in the story. You see, there's a very cleverly hidden Easter egg in the Steven Universe movie, which involves Kevin's car falling into the poison. Now, tell me if I'm reaching in this one, but I believe that the Crewniverse is foreshadowing the events of the next Kevin episode in Steven Universe future. Kevin has finally realized that materialism is not the way to deal with your problems, and that the only way to truly find happiness is in the mind of a kid. And considering the fact that now Steven is becoming like Kevin, I feel that it's finally time for Kevin to help Stevonnie, the same way that she tried to help him. Oh, but Kevin's development has to happen off-screen if the Crewniverse wants to remain consistent with Episode 9. I'm actually crying, holy hell, what? Oh my gosh, I thought I was actually gonna start crying.